Death floats on the high seas. A Raven Darkblade mystery. Chapter 1. All aboard the Ship of Fools. The sun rose over the ocean like a giant orange being peeled by invisible hands that weren't actually there, because that would be weird. Detective Raven Darkblade stood on the lido deck of the magnificent cruise ship, serene seasickness, watching the horizon do that thing horizons do when they're horizontal. He was 6 feet 3 inches tall, or was it 5 feet 9 inches? His height depended on his mood. With eyes the color of storm clouds, mixed with disappointment and a hint of whiskey. He wasn't supposed to be here. He was supposed to be in his office, drinking heavily and brooding about the case that got away, which was every case because he was terrible at his job, except when he wasn't. But his doctor, therapist, bartender had insisted he needed a vacation. "You need to relax, Raven," she'd said, not relaxingly. "Take a cruise. What's the worst that could happen?" Famous last words that weren't actually last, because she was still alive. Probably. The serene seasickness was a floating palace of excess, if palaces could float and excess could be measured in metric tons of shrimp. It had 17 decks, or was it 12? The elevator buttons were confusing. 3 pools, 8 restaurants, and approximately 1 million tourists, wearing socks with sandals. Raven sipped his morning coffee, which tasted like regret, mixed with international waters. He was trying to blend in as a normal vacationer, which was difficult, since he was wearing his trademark trench coat over his Hawaiian shirt and swim trunks. The coat billowed dramatically in the non-existent wind. "Ladies and gentlemen," the ship's intercom crackled to life with the enthusiasm of a game show host on cocaine. "This is your captain speaking, Captain Fitzgerald Monterey Jameson IV, but you can call me Captain Fitzy." Raven winced. He'd met Captain Fitzy yesterday. The man was about as qualified to captain a ship as a goldfish was to perform brain surgery. He'd won the position in a poker game, or possibly a dance-off. The story changed depending on how many rum punches he'd had. "I have some super-duper news and some not-so-super news," the captain continued. "The not-so-super news is that we're having a teensy-tiny technical difficulty. Someone, and I'm not naming names, Derek, accidentally deleted our entire navigation system while trying to download TikTok videos." A collective groan rose from the passengers, which was impressive since most of them were still asleep or already drunk at 7 a.m. "But the super-duper news is that we're following a pod of really friendly whales who seem to know where they're going. So we're basically on a whale-guided tour now. Isn't that whaley exciting?" The pun hit Raven like a wet fish wrapped in disappointment. He was about to head back to his cabin, inside room. No window, smelled like feet, when he heard it. A scream. Not just any scream, but the kind of scream that said, "I've just discovered a dead body, and my life will never be the same. Also, I might have left my straightener on at home." Raven's detective instincts kicked in like a mule with commitment issues. He ran toward the sound, his flip-flops slapping against the deck like applause from very small, very wet hands. The scream had come from the Serenity Spa, which was neither serene nor spa-like at this particular moment. A crowd had gathered, consisting of passengers in various states of cruise attire, from formerly casual to "I've given up on life" but in a tropical way. At the center of the crowd, a woman in a terry cloth robe was pointing at something with a shaking hand that was definitely attached to her arm. She was either 25 or 55, depending on how much work she'd had done. "He's dead!" she shrieked. "Dead as a doornail. Deader than disco. Deceased to the max." Raven pushed through the crowd like Moses parting the Red Sea, if Moses wore a trench coat and the Red Sea was made of tourists. There, face down in the meditation pool, which was just a regular pool but with crystals around it, floated a man. He was definitely dead, which Raven could tell because living people rarely floated face down for this long, without at least wiggling a bit. The man was wearing a captain's uniform, but not the ship's captain uniform. This was fancier, with more medals and what appeared to be a sash that said, "World's Best Captain," in Comic Sans font. "Everyone back," Raven commanded with the authority of someone who had once watched a YouTube video about crime scenes. "I'm Detective Raven Darkblade, and this is now a crime scene." "Are you ship security?" asked a hairy-chested man whose chest hair formed what looked like a map of Delaware. "No," Raven admitted, then quickly added, "I'm a passenger who happens to be a detective. It's like being a doctor on a plane, but for murder." The crowd seemed to accept this logic, which said more about the crowd than the logic. Raven knelt beside the pool, careful not to get his trench coat wet because dry cleaning on a cruise ship was highway robbery if highways could rob people. The dead man had a name tag: Captain Augustus Tremendulous, guest lecturer on captaining. "Did anyone know this man?" Raven asked the crowd. "He was teaching a seminar," volunteered a woman wearing so much cruise-themed jewelry she clinked when she moved. "How to be a captain in 3 easy steps. I was signed up for the 10 a.m. session." "Fascinating," Raven lied fascinatingly. "And who found the body?" The woman in the terry cloth robe raised her still shaking hand. "I did. I'm Brenda Shoutsalot. I came in for my 6:30 a.m. meditation session, but instead of finding inner peace, I found outer death." Raven pulled out his detective notebook, which was actually just a cruise ship napkin with a picture of a smiling dolphin on it. "Tell me exactly what you saw, Miss Shoutsalot." "Well," Brenda began, her voice trembling like a chihuahua in a thunderstorm. "I walked in, and the meditation music was playing. That generic pan flute stuff that's supposed to be calming, but actually makes me want to scream. And then I saw him, floating there like a dead man in a pool." Brilliant deduction, Raven thought, but didn't say because he was professional, except when he wasn't. A new figure pushed through the crowd, the ship's Dr. Melissa Stethoscope. Raven assumed that wasn't her real name, but on this ship, who knew? She was wearing a medical coat over a bikini, because cruise ship formal. "Let me through," Dr. Stethoscope commanded. "I'm a doctor. Well, technically I'm a dermatologist, but skin is an organ and death affects organs." She examined the body with the expertise of someone who had once removed a suspicious mole. "He's definitely dead," she announced. "I'd say he's been dead for between 1 hour and 12 hours. "That's quite a range," Raven observed. "Listen, I usually work with acne and Botox. Dead people aren't exactly my specialty. But I can tell you one thing. This wasn't an accidental drowning. How can you tell? Dr. Stethoscope pointed to the back of the dead captain's head. See that wound? Shaped like a perfect circle? That's from being hit with something round and heavy. Raven scanned the spa area with his detective eyes, which were just regular eyes but squintier. There, next to the meditation pool, was a display of decorative brass singing bowls. One was missing. The murder weapon, he said dramatically, pointing at the empty space where a bowl should be. Someone killed Captain Tremendulous with a singing bowl. The irony is deafening. Actually, said a know-it-all passenger with a fanny pack full of cruise facts, singing bowls don't technically sing. They resonate at specific frequencies that... Not now, Trivia Tom, Raven interrupted, somehow knowing the man's name without asking. Captain Fitzie's voice crackled over the intercom again. Attention passengers. Slight update on our whale following situation. The whales have started swimming in circles, so we're also swimming in circles. Think of it as a really big, really slow merry-go-round. Raven felt a headache coming on like a freight train carrying smaller headaches. A murder on a cruise ship that couldn't return to port. This was either going to be his greatest case or his worst vacation. Probably both. Nobody leaves this spa, Raven commanded. I need to question everyone. But I have a shuffleboard tournament at 9, protested a senior citizen whose tan was so deep it had its own area code. Murder takes precedence over shuffleboard, Raven said seriously. Since when? The old man grumbled. Raven looked at the crowd of passengers, hairy-chested pool enthusiasts, belly-flop champions warming up, trivia addicts clutching their fact books, buffet bandits with suspicious bulges in their pockets that were probably just shrimp. One of them was a killer. Time to categorize the suspects. All right, everyone line up, Raven commanded. I'm going to need to sort you into groups based on how suspicious you are. Is that legal? Asked someone. On international waters, everything is legal, Raven replied confidently, having no idea if that was true. Now, let's start with the suspicious category. Anyone here have a grudge against Captain Tremendulous? Half the crowd raised their hands. This was going to be a long cruise. To be continued. At sea. Author's note. This chapter is dedicated to all the cruise ships currently going in circles somewhere. Also to my cousin Janet, who got food poisoning on a cruise and still rated it 4 stars on TripAdvisor. Any resemblance to actual cruise ship murders is purely coincidental and slightly concerning.